This conference will now be recorded.
Sustainable development goals, resilient and more adaptable. Innovation most so as it was in other transformations like the digital transformation. You could have, if we demonstrate that you can energy in this direction. Of course, the entrepreneurial capacity has been driven by other forces in the digital transformation, but we have a very good example in the last 30, more or less 20 years of this incredible power of transformation of society by entrepreneurial capacity. And the aim is to see if we can repeat this kind of cycle, but for different goals, this time for, let's say, creating, establish a more sustainable society. That means that the drivers are quite different, the attitudes are different. We are not looking for unicorns, for example, but as in a quite interesting debate about entrepreneurship for impact, we call them zebras. So they are all different, but they are all working together in order to drive a direction. And you solve is an experiment, strategic experiment within the ENI SPC MED program for this area. So the focus is in the EMME region to force this process in quite different environments. Just to say the last, to underline the last point. Aglanja and Strovolos are relevant, of course, in Cyprus, but whenever we go in other countries in the region, as you have been showing, Salvatore, with this unbelievable demographic growth, the size and the complexity of the problems are giant. I mean, we have as partner in the project Egypt with 100 million people, and small towns there are towns of a couple of million inhabitants. So this is a nice lab to understand things, and in USolve we could test either in our lab, but also we can explore other dimensions where the complexity of the problem is really challenging.
Thank you very much, Fabio. Anixi, I have just a question. Since you have Anixi, thank you very much for the presentation, for showing us that belongs in different scientific community, these innovation-based methodology and approaches that are really inspiring. There are some aspects like the transformative model of guilds or the innovation pipeline that have been used for product development and other kind of domain. How this technology will impact the built environment? So not more at methodology or philosophical level ambitions, but concretely, can you make some concrete examples? In particular, I mean, for example, some of the recommendations that we wrote at the end in this kind of policy framework are about creating city-to-city networks. And you mentioned about the network of young and women. How these experiences that you are going to develop or are developing can, for example, be a platform for developing cities-to-city network, or for example, selection. You have the innovation pipeline for selecting relevant experiences. Can these directly be used for selecting, for example, initiatives with respect to municipalities? So can we use new model, using a term very kind to Fabio? I borrow from him. So we have told that we need to unframe and reframe. Could you support this kind of process?
Well, I believe yes. Okay, these tools are used within the context of this project in order to actually highlight and create awareness about priorities, and through to actually to strengthen also the engagement of many partners. So since we're talking about urban sustainable development, and the focus is also, if you noticed, on the creative, the wider area of creative industries, I think they will help into the shaping and the change, the transformation of mentalities and basically the culture, in order to, and through entrepreneurship, well, you will see some solutions being implemented and adopted, hopefully by the environment, the community. I think they will be effective in actually creating this urban transition. They will not be, let's say, the main element, but they will help, they will add to the process, if that makes sense.
To add a specific example that I think is nice to be discussed following your suggestion, Salvatore. In the first meetings, it has been clear, but it might seem trivial that water is a problem in the region. Mm-hmm. But it's a different, in each of the regions, the approach to water is different. And the idea of this project is to be specific. So, for example, in Jordan, they feel they are the poorest country in the area in terms of access to water, because they do not control their water. So their must is to recycle water. So what we can do with USolve is to try to test at an urban level if we can close the loop of water by changing the behavior of people. So trying to have a systemic change there, bringing, for example, food production in the city, while we are reusing water coming from the city networks for urban production of food in the city. And that means we are not inventing urban food production, because we have already other technologies and we can use and adapt to whatever is already in place. We will not invent the cleaning system for water, but we have to change the behavior and the mentality for people. Correct. In terms of their way of deal with food and deal with water. And this is what we think, what we call creative approach in USolve. So with a small amount, a small capacity of intervention, we should make this kind of structural change, which is more in terms of mentality and behavior than in terms of creating new technologies. Technologies will come and will be combined. This is a very simple, but I think it's significant example to answer your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, this, from one side, increase the complexity, but on the other side, having examples or champions in the area would be a good way to show off a portfolio of solution already done by the people of the area, for the people of the area. This is a great added value. Thank you very much.
Or just, I don't want to take more time, but I think the point you raised is important. This is again a systemic approach. So again, from Jordan, there is a nice example. They want to solve health-related problems by changing the way people are eating. So you address one of the SDGs through another SDG, and again, this is based on the idea that you cannot break things and have silos where you solve your specific problem with your specific tools, but you need this kind of connective intelligence, taking and putting things together, especially in the urban environment where things are deeply connected.
I would now move to the next speaker.
Gonzalo is online,
Thank you very much. I would now invite Professor Gonzalo Canto Moniz, University of Coimbra, to present a presentation about Urbinat, Urban Innovative and Inclusive Nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to be here. It's my pleasure to contribute. I'm presenting here today the Urbinat project that we have been. Sorry, can you hear me? I hope so. That we have been working for 3 years. We are in the mid of the implementation of the project, and we would like to bring you the state of the art of the project at this moment, trying to contribute to your thematic. So I will share my screen. I'm not used to this platform. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, it doesn't allow me to show my screen.
Near to the camera icon, you can see a screen icon, so you can click it, select your screen, and click share.
Yeah, but it says that I have to open my.
If you use Mac, you need to disconnect and give permission with system preference, reconnect again.
Okay. Yes, I use Mac.
Yes. So yes. Okay. Disconnect, give access, and reconnect again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but the problem is the same. I cannot share my screen. I don't know if it's possible if we go to the next speaker, and I'll try to solve this problem. Hello?
Again, to share your screen, it seems that now yeah, you are now the presenter.
And now, yeah.
So at the center there are 4 circles:
Yes.
mic, camera, and share.
No. Mic, camera. Then it says in Portuguese screen and out.
Okay. Okay. So let's make the break, 10 minutes break, and we start again at 3 p.m. local time. Thank you.
Okay, let's try to solve the problem during the break. You need to disconnect from GoToMeeting, go to system preference, and give access to this application, give permission, and after reconnect again.
Sorry, can you repeat? Sorry.
You need to disconnect. You need to
Yes.
close the GoToMeeting open the system preference.
Okay.
1 second. Go to accessibility.
Okay.
Then the display. Overview. 1 second. Sorry, system preference, security and privacy.
Okay.
Go to privacy,
Yes.
accessibility, and click and go to meeting. Give access to go to meeting. And after this, connect again and go to meeting so you can check the share screen. Okay?
Okay. Let's try.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, let's try again. Yes, perfect. Now see your screen. Okay, after the break,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yes. Fabio?
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah. Thank
Sorry
you.
for my delay, but I thought it was, I thought the conference was starting now, but I see that it's already, because there is a time issue. I think you are 2 hours in advance or 1 hour?
It's not a problem. Can you please make a presentation in full screen, in presenter mode? Okay, thank you.
Welcome back. We are ready to start the second part of our session. So I would invite Professor Moniz to share his screen and tell us something about Urbinat, urban innovative and inclusive nature. Professor Moniz, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the time related to manage the screen share. Thank you, Fabio, for the invitation to be here and share this project financed by the Horizon 2020 that we propose as healthy corridors for an inclusive public space to approach today's meeting. And I will give you an overview, as I said before, about the project current state, considering that we are in the middle of this process, let's say. So the project framework is related to the smart and sustainable cities founded by the European Commission. The aim is to work with these both concepts, also with the idea of inclusive urban regeneration, trying to approach deprived urban areas and to find solutions related to nature-based solutions for 7 European cities. So these 5 topics were given to several in the frame of a call of the Horizon 2020, as I said, where 4 projects were selected to address these topics. So how Urbinat deal with these topics is something that we will try to address during this presentation. So we try to put together the idea of the healthy corridor as a cluster of nature-based solutions, trying to address urban regeneration through solidarity practices, and to develop a co-governance model in the frame of living labs that should be implemented in each one of our cities, trying to address the engagement of the citizens through a co-creation process. So this puts together citizens, city, nature, and of course, also urban planning and architecture in general. So we aim with this framework to address the inclusive public space. So what we have been doing in order to achieve this is to activate the living lab and the community of practice that operates in the frame of these living labs, trying to develop the diagnostic of our cities that we call front runners and followers. And here we include a city of Khorramabad in Iran that became partner of the project as observer, but meanwhile they are taking a leading position as followers. So we try to develop the digital enabler strategy and a participatory toolkit for co-creation to activate this process in all our cities. It's very important to also promote a stakeholders advisory board so that we create a platform of dialogue between the several stakeholders that are in the field. Related to the inclusive urban regeneration and the implementation of healthy corridor with our NBS catalog, we developed till now the co-design stage in our front runners, and we develop a new NBS catalog proposed by the citizens in each one of our cities. So the healthy corridor concept is now stable for different cities according to the local culture. This is very important because it's a concept that then needs to be adapted by each city, and we are now licensing the healthy corridor urban plan to start the construction, let's say, next year. So we develop also an observatory platform to monitor and evaluate this corridor, and we are in contact with the European Commission task forces, something parallel of what you have been also having in this discussion, and we are leading the task force 6 on co-creation, and we'll be happy welcome other partners, other projects that also want to share with us their advances in terms of co-creation. So this is the map of Urbinat. So we work mainly in Europe, based in the 7 cities, the front runners Porto, Nantes, and Sofia, and the follower cities Hotstastrup in the north, Brussels, Siena, and Nova Gorica. We have, of course, transversal partners that work with all the cities, but we have in each city one scientific partner that creates a task force with the municipality to implement the healthy corridor. We have also other important partners that join the consortium as observers, as the Cyprus Institute, here represented by Fabio, that joined the consortium this year, and we have been working with them in order to share the knowledge from the Urbinat and the Cyprus Institute. And this happens with all our observers from Brazil, Oman, Iran, China, Japan, with the idea of creating a community of practice. So this is the scheme that tries to represent this idea of a community of practice that works together, sharing at 4 different levels the knowledge that they produce, that we call the consortium level, let's say the first level, the cities level. It's very important that we create a community inside of each city with the local partners and trying to develop synergies, and then also between the cities. It's very interesting to follow how the cities are interested to share their knowledge and their practice between them. And of course, the wider level where we work with of course, the European Commission, but also other task forces and other institutions out of Europe, as this meeting that we are having here. So what we try to address as our proposal is to work in the suburbs of the cities. I will take the city of Porto as a reference to make it the discourse more simple. And our idea was to identify social housing neighborhoods that were produced after the Second World War, let's say in the second half of the 20th century, and that they were implemented in agricultural areas outside of the city center. And we see here in this representation these areas in red that represent this proposal of 14 social housing neighborhoods to be implemented in the city of Porto. This kind of metrics, this kind of problematic we identified in all our cities across Europe, and probably this is a scenario that we know it happens across the world. It deals with the development of the urban, of the special planning of the cities in the second part of the 20th century. So what we have is something similar as this implementation of a social housing neighborhood with these modernist blocks and open public space completely disconnected from the city, implemented in an agricultural area without infrastructures, and putting this community out of the city center. And this is something that happened in 1961, the time that this picture was taken, but it's also something that happens today when we see the same block, the same area crossed by streets, crossed by rail lines, with difficulties of connecting between these housing areas and the city center. So this is the scenario that we try to identify in all our cities. And the idea, of course, was taking Henri Lefebvre, the idea of the right to the city, the right to the urban life, conditions for renewed humanism and democracy, putting together all the issues that are present today in the discussion of the city. The integration of nature, the integration of the public spaces, the slow mobility, all these rights to the city that we are still fighting after 50 years of the Henri Lefebvre proposal. So taking the reference of the UN Habitat discussions, we aim to develop a more compact, socially inclusive, more integrated and connected city that promotes more sustainable urban development and resilient to climate change. So what is this healthy corridor? The idea of the healthy corridor, of course, it comes from the idea of the green corridors that are already being implemented by most of the cities, but we try to bring a critical perspective on the green corridor. We understand that the healthy corridor is a public space that connects and links neighborhoods as a corridor or a pathway, but it's not only a nature-based solution, so it's not only focused on the green, but also human-centered, providing a double effect on environment and on people's health and well-being. So this picture that we introduced to our cities is this idea of developing a green corridor. It's still a green infrastructure, but we need to activate the community towards this green space, trying to integrate this green infrastructure in their everyday life, in the activities of the community, so that we have a really effect on people's well-being. To do this, we developed a co-creation methodology that starts early in the beginning of the project in the diagnostic. So the citizens are challenged to do the diagnostic with Urbinat in order to identify their concrete needs, their concrete challenges, and their concrete dreams for their city. So then we move to the co-design phase, where we co-create with the citizens the nature-based solutions for their territory, and we developed with them the healthy corridor strategy. We move to the implementation, where we promote also a co-implementation, trying to put everyone on the decision making of the urban strategies at the same table, and we involve the community in this process in order to develop also the monitoring, the evaluation of the healthy corridor together with the community. So this is a circular process. Then it's replicated in the follower cities, of course, learning from the lessons that are taken from the front runners implementation. To do that, we need to develop this co-governance system where we challenge the municipalities to put at the same table, of course, the municipal technicians, the elected people, the community residents, the champions, the local organizations that are usually known as the usual suspect, but in fact they are key to create synergies with their local projects and to develop a community system that can govern the territory in a more collaborative way. This stakeholder advisory board that we are implementing, we call it the Municipal Roadmap Strategy. We are now implementing that in Porto, Sofia, and Nantes with different names, with different strategies. It's very important that we adapt to the local culture. So in Porto, we are activating the Working Commission for the Healthy Corridor with several working groups to develop the nature-based solutions together. In Sofia, it's called Sofia Advisory Board, and we invite citizens to participate in this board. There are now 30 citizens participating. And in Nantes, we adapt from a local commission that was already working, and they integrate Urbinat in that process. So it's very important that these methodologies are flexible enough to be adaptable by other cities. So the idea is to go here from the living lab, this idea of a laboratory that takes place in the community, not in the university, not in the municipality, but inside of the community, putting together citizens, the city, municipality, the researchers and developers through this pathway of co-creation, the diagnostic, the design, the implementation and the monitoring, towards creating, in fact, a community of practice that is not only working for Urbinat, but they will develop their own methodologies and tools for future projects. So we try to empower the community with this methodology. So how this has been taking place? We see here the co-diagnostic, where we propose several methodologies that then were adapted in each city in order to engage the citizens in several activities that will give us the starting point for this process. So we use cultural mapping, photo voice, walkthrough, mappings of feelings and senses. So in order to work more with the perceptions of the citizens, but also in balance with data collected from the statistical, the GIS maps, and so on. Then we move to the co-design phase, where we continue to work also with children. It's very important to work with the creativity of the citizens, not only to select the NBS and transform it in their NBS, in their local nature-based solution. So the ideation and prototyping process are very important in order to go from a catalog to concrete solutions adapt to each local culture. So we are now starting the co-implementation, and I hope to bring you later in another moment the implementation phase of Urbinat. But it was very important to understand this co-creation process. So we developed this pathway of several moments of interaction with different groups. We see here from the municipality to the technicians to the associations, in public events, in small events, trying to go from an open participation to a proximity participation, sometimes one-to-one, to listen what citizens have to tell us about their territory, about their experience, and their knowledge that in most of the cases is much higher than the knowledge of the researchers. So, of course, we had the challenge of the COVID-19, where we developed online methodologies to co-create, to develop solutions for the territory. And we see here some where we were able to design proposals with the citizens online, and also this proximity to being inside of the territory to interact directly with the citizens. So in the end, especially in Porto, but this is the same scenario in the different cities, we arrived to this, in this case, almost 40 proposals, organized in 4 main categories related to public space, like the renovation of paths, as we see here, paths that were already existing, but they were not formalized, let's say. Also, open air auditoriums that create places to stay, but also to share culture and performance arts. Also, actions related, for instance, children propose cleaning their neighborhood as an activist attitude, let's say. And many others that I will not explain, but in certain way, this will help us to understand how this healthy corridor could connect, relink areas that were in some way separating different communities. And this map shows how this corridor tries to connect something that was already there, but it was not activated, let's say. And it puts in relation in this case, these 3 neighborhoods that we see here that were very close, but they have difficulties in interacting. So the healthy corridor will be most of its goal, it's a place of interaction. Not only this green infrastructure, but also all these nature-based solutions that are ones more related to public space, others more related with culture and sports, others with education and environment, and others related to social and solidarity economy. So this is the final, let's say, diagram that tries to put together all these topics and the urban plan that represents this green infrastructure, where it's an infrastructure for something to happen, and this something to happen will be taken by the citizens. As an example, this social and solidarity economy strategy, the citizens propose these 3 interactive solutions, let's say, a solidarity market, a community kitchen, and a community garden. So this idea to produce collectively, to sell collectively in a sharing way that in a traditional selling system, and also a community kitchen to share also the healthy food together. So this will take place in this area. It's an old farm that is abandoned for many years, and all this territory was part of this old farm. So the idea is to create here a public space where the solidarity market can take place, but also other activities, where we preserve the history of the place, bringing the stones of this former building into the public space, and trying to also reconnect all the pathways that were part of this farm, but they were also developed through the years in this new infrastructure for the territory that combines memory with what are the aims of the community. And we see here on the top, for instance, an auditorium for perform arts here on the top of this ruin, and while the solidarity market can take place in the square, so the community can interact at different levels. It's very important. We did yesterday an experiment of what could be this community kitchen, and we offer a soup with the vegetables from the community garden to the community. Also, everyone brought something from their home, but this soup of vegetables was the symbol of this spirit of community that links the physical intervention with the community sense of belonging to this area. So what we aim is this right to an inclusive public
Professor
space.
Muniz, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
If you
This
could,
is my slide.
yeah, couple of minutes max. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabio. So to conclude with this idea of the right to the public space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question from the public? Just one? No? Thank you. I would like to ask whether you could stay for the general discussion at the end, since I think that the Urbanet approach, ambitions, and methodology are important to rethink the space in which we are and the value it might have under different views. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would now invite Mr. Solomon to give us a speech on EU policy and financial instruments ecosystem for urban transition. Mr. Solomon, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabio. I'm trying to share my slide. Wait a second. Slide. Okay. Sure. Okay. Before I go to my slides, can you hear me first of all?
Clear.
Yes. Before going to my slides, I would like to say a few things about me, since I'm the least likely to be known to this group. I'm the Research Innovation and Space Attaché of Cyprus, and space as in rockets and not as in urban development, just to clarify. And basically what I do, I represent Cyprus in the legislative bodies where member states are represented at the Council of the EU, and in particular the Research Working Party and Space Working Party. Currently, I'm working on reformulating ERA governance and the role of ERA, European Research Area that is, as well as negotiating the association agreements with third countries. The things that I will present today were also presented to us by the Commission, and in general, we're going through a very flex and very transitionary period where a lot of things are taking shape, are updated, are reformed in order to fit with the results and the consequences of the crisis, as well as the green agenda and the Fit for 55 packages of European Union. Now, let's go to the first slide. What are missions? And well, as I said already, climate and health crises need to be tackled in a new and innovative ways. Missions are a new way to bring concrete solutions to some of our greatest challenges. They are a new management and communication tool, if you like, not only for EU, not only at EU level that is, but also for national and regional actions that aim at bringing concrete results in 5 specific areas. These areas are, and I start with the importance as I perceive it, climate neutral and smart cities, healthy soil, healthy oceans, climate resilient regions, and fight against cancer. All 5 of them have ambitious goals and aim to deliver concrete results by 2030. They hope to achieve this by first putting R&I into a more applied role, and second, experimenting with new forms of governance collaborations, as well as enhancing citizen and stakeholder engagement. In other words, EU missions are coordinated efforts by the EU to pool the necessary resources in terms of EU and national/regional funding, as well as to facilitate relevant regulations and other softer policy interventions and initiatives, such as exchange of best practices. They also aim to mobilize and activate public and private actors, such as research institutes, farmers and land managers, entrepreneurs, investors. And let me give 2 examples here. Missions will engage with citizens to boost societal uptake on these new solutions and approaches, among other things. And also, they will engage with private investors in order to scale up and demonstrate, the demonstration process, the projects that will be funded most likely by grants. Each mission, and I conclude this first bullet point, will manage a portfolio of actions, not all of which are research projects, to achieve a measurable goal that could not be achieved through individual actions alone and without coordination of this action. Now, going to my second bullet on this slide, how were the missions prepared? Commission initially proposed certain broad areas for missions as part of their Horizon Europe proposal, which came to the body that I represent, Cyprus, the Research Working Party, which were later modified and agreed by the co-legislators, meaning the EU member states and the European Parliament. After this political agreement was reached on Horizon Europe regulation and decision, the 5 mission boards, gathering top experts from across the Union, were formed to help specify, design, and implement missions for the EU. Based on their proposals, handed over to the Commission about a year ago, the 5 missions were identified in the Horizon Europe strategic plan. A month later, the Commission validated the 5 proposed missions. They enter into a preparatory phase to develop 5 detailed implementation plans, which includes objectives, intervention logic, as well as indicators for measuring the performance of each mission and for monitoring. As you may understood, now the process is at the implementation stage, which are the program committees of Horizon Europe program, as well as all other relevant bodies, as well as the authorities that are managing similar actions at the local, regional, or even national level. What are the next steps at the EU level? The next step at the EU level is the Commission assess these plans against specific criteria and gave a go-ahead and will give a go-ahead to the launch of the missions and as described in the communication that was adopted and published a few weeks ago on the 28th of September 2021. The program committees of all relevant EU programs will adjust their annual work programs accordingly. Also, coordination efforts with national and regional and local governments are underway, as I already said. Finally, they will reach out to local entrepreneurs, investors, stakeholders, and citizens in order to boost the societal uptake and the sustainability of the new solution and of the new solutions and approaches. Now, let's take one mission at a time by starting with probably the most relevant for you guys. We'll start with the mission, which I also think is also the most important and most critical, the mission for climate neutral and smart cities. What are its goals? The two goals of this mission is to deliver 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030, and to ensure that these cities act as experimentation and innovation hubs to enable all European cities to follow suit by 2050. And a third, more general policy objective, which will be measured, but the different candidate cities will not be accountable, would be to provide lower energy bills, cleaner air, safer walking and biking areas in the cities, as well as lower level of traffic congestion and less pollution-induced health problems to the citizens. So why a specific mission on urban areas? In a sentence, cities have the potential to deliver a major contribution to our European Green Deal target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030, leading in a climate and digital transformation of our continent. And I have on the slides few key numbers. I'm not going to, for the sake of saving some time, I'm not going to dwell on it. You have access to the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm sure you're well aware, much better than I do. So I'm going to the next slide. Now, adaptation and climate change mission. This is more of a regional, it has a more of a regional perspective rather than urban perspective. Its goal is to support at least 150 European regions and communities to become climate resilient by 2030. In order to achieve that, we will need a societal transformation, among other things, in every region and every corner of the Union, as we all aware that there is a every region is intertwined and communicate and has impact to at least the its neighboring regions in Europe, where the geography is so small. You can, in a sentence, you can consider this mission as a call to action to transform our societies together to become truly resilient in the years ahead. I'm going to the third mission, which deals with the health of the soil. And the goal of this mission is to create 100 living labs and lighthouses. Now, I asked the Commission what is the difference between lighthouse and lab. Basically, they told me it's a smaller lighthouse is a smaller lab to lead the transition towards healthy soils by 2030. One other objective is to protect and restore soils in Europe and beyond. Thirdly, putting communities and stakeholders at the center of innovation process to co-create knowledge and solutions in real life conditions is another objective. In a sentence, if I want to summarize this mission, is a call to act together in order to have cleaner, more productive and resilient soils for food, for people, nature, and for better climate conditions and more stable climate conditions, if I may say. The next mission, which is quite relevant for not only the areas, the coastal areas, but also the areas where they have inland waterways or rivers and lakes. So it's much wider than our seas because it includes all our river systems. Hopes to improve the health of our waterways and of our bodies of water, as oceans and water are essential to the well-being of our society and to the well-being of the tens of millions who live in European coastal areas, in coastal cities, but as I said before, also along rivers and lakes. To understand why this mission is important, we need to look at what is happening in the western coast of the United States, where we see great level of ocean acidification, bleaching of corals, which is also a worldwide phenomenon because of the increase of temperature of the seas and oceans, and this in general this destruction of the reefs and all the ecosystems around it. Now, this mission aims at help us achieve our European Green Deal objective to decarbonize, to increase the protection of biodiversity, and to fight plastic pollution in our seas and oceans and waterways, and to fight pollution of all kinds. And I'm going back circle to where I started. I skipped the mission on cancer because I think, given the subject of today's meeting, is not very relevant for this audience. But I go back to what I think is more relevant, which is the climate neutral and smart cities. The next step after the adoption of the communication was in the beginning of October, the mission platforms were created. Now the few pivotal elements for success on successful participation in these missions are the following. The Commission hopes to create networks of cities, which is linked with the fact that these first 100 cities will act as the example to help eventually all cities become climate neutral and smart by 2050. So there will be always a focus on the network of the cities participating in the first wave of 100 cities. They pointed to us some best practices in Sweden, Greece, and Spain of networks of climate neutrality and of effective transition to climate neutrality. I don't know more details. I can find out if you like to know more. The next bullet point, the second bullet point, scale up and uptake in order to ensure a sustainability of the impact. To achieve the objective towards this, in order to go towards this objective, would be to engage the public as well as private sector resources at all levels, from local, regional, national, and EU level. And for example, just to be more specific, the non-public involvement at the local and regional level aims to ensure that each city that would be part of this mission will have sufficient skin in the game, as we say, for ensuring that whatever is done with a more long-term perspective, as well as at facilitating the scale-up and uptake of the initial effort.
Dr. Solomon, please, if you could go to the conclusion, 1 minute.
Yes. Well, I can go to the conclusion. So this I have in this slide just to understand how complex and rich the new ecosystem of the mission. I put this slide to show you all the relevant actions and initiatives related with only one mission. Then I was planning to say some things on the Bauhaus, but I think the next speaker will do that. And I go back to my conclusions. Now, my conclusion is, before I would like to make one last comment. In this process and after the Commission communication, my colleagues involved in the implementation of Horizon Europe are at the process of reformulating and updating the annual work program, as I already said. And also the managing authorities of structural funds and also of the resilient recovery plans might need to do also some changes if need be. Because of, as I said before, we are at a very critical point. Now is the time for mobilizing the most likely the stakeholders, all the stakeholders involved in this process, in order to ensure that there will be no successful or potential candidate candidate city that can miss this opportunity, because I think those cities that will enter late in this process will have lower probability of benefiting from this process. So now is the time to mobilize and try to learn as much as you can on this initiative, and also try to organize and coordinate with all the relevant parties. And with that, thank you, and the floor to you, back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Very welcome your final comment. It's really time to act, and there is the framework that will enable a lot of activities in the year to come. Any comment, question?
A comment on the overall structure we tried to give to this workshop, and I think it's coming up that we are trying to connect the different levels we need to promote and implement the urban transition. So I'm very glad to Gonzalo for the presentation, because it was showing a real, how a project from the previous European framework is impacting in the cities. So it's really going to transform the city in a way which has been, let's say, paving the path that now is implemented with the new European Bauhaus. So in Urbinat, what I've seen when I started dealing with the project is that we see both the ecological, the social, and the aesthetical level all put together. So everything made in that project is twinning these three components. So I'm very happy about about the opportunity to join the project and to show the project in this showcase of today, because this is is the right way to approach a structural transition in a city in the direction of climate resilience, climate adaptability, but with the inclusion of people, in a dialogue with people, and without losing the aesthetical levels, or even better, in a process which is aimed to regenerate the aesthetical approach to urban planning and in general to the urban fabric. And now we see that the new framework coming from the European Commission is exactly taking this approach as a mainstream. So this is a big step forward. I think that the new mission is designed in a way which is, let's say, addressing the transition in a systemic, the systemic level, putting together these different dimension. And I think that we will see also how the private capitals are going to later on. So we will have a more complete framework.
Thank you, Fabio. I would like to invite now Professor Manuel Naboni from University of Parma and lecturer at the Royal Danish Academy, who will show us quite some examples about adaptation and regeneration of the urban systems.
And happy to celebrate the first physical presenter we have today.
Yes. Okay, so thank you very much, Salvatore and Fabio, for the invitation. I spent already a couple of months at University of Cyprus, and now I'm back for this event. So I'll try to bring some example that comes mainly from a path of, let's say, in practice and in research. And I would like also to begin with questioning the definition of sustainability we use today, where we basically are talking of not making any impact into the environment. But the question is that the environment is probably already compromised. We have evolving a climate crisis. So perhaps we need to think of a built environment which is taken care and somehow that interplay with nature. So going to solution that from one side take care of the compromise, and from the other side we create spaces that allows human and natural system to co-evolve. Now the focus of today is to show some example that relates to the concept of regenerative design. But an intro layer is perhaps talking and taking one element, temperature, that we have seen in the early presentation of many, and discuss by how much should we allow the temperature to increase, or what is a good gap of temperature. Somehow we can see that what can be good for us is what allows basically these human activities, human comfort, as well as the ecosystem to reach this diversification, to reach richness, and so on. So this definition perhaps would be crossing the different scale and the different example I'm going to show. So the idea is to present some solution or some ideas or some studies related to from the mesoscale of the city up to personal device, architectural personal device that can be used. The index is quite wrong for some reason. Okay, we start from the mesoscale, starting from some of the studies I'm conducting mainly in Scandinavia, and this is for the city of Gothenburg, where we see how in 2050, as compared to 2018, there is quite an increase of local temperature. These are the average temperature clearly. But when we look at the site, and this is again the city of Gothenburg, what we have at a certain time in summer, in July, at 4 o'clock, is that we already have building that reach temperature of about 38 degrees, depending on which building. And we have certain areas on the outside that are up to 30, 35 degrees. So you can imagine how this is a problem, especially for Scandinavians that are not used to that. When we look in 2050, what we have according to simulation projection is that we have basically building temperature up to 40 degrees, and outer part of the city, this is a segment that are at very high temperature. So the concept of that we discussed before of thermal resilience, just to perhaps explain it, is the delta representing how much, what is the difference in temperature between today and a future climatic prediction. We can see that certain buildings do not have increase of temperature into the future, despite the boundary conditions are changing. Whereas we see other buildings that have an increase of temperature, indoor temperature at that given time of 2 degrees. As well for the site, there are certain areas like those perhaps under this forest and this valley, there is also a topographical system that have substantially same temperature today and in 2050, despite an increase of temperature. So a first topic I would like to launch is, could we create a resilient space that will not be affected by climate change, and in a more articulated loop will not contribute to climate change? And the partial answer is yes, because we can see already by simulation that certain urban and certain natural features would act that way. When we look at the carbonization scenario for the future, these are just some extracts from a larger study in Venice, where we are studying about 10 areas. What we can see is up given temperature within buildings today. We see that certain buildings have a temperature of 21 degrees, certain others even up to 28 degrees. These are today recordings for 3 characteristic areas. What we have down here, it's again this delta correlated to the thermal resilience, and is in the increase of indoor temperature at that given time. So these 3 areas we can see that have different increases of temperature. The first one, it's basically about 1 degree increase of temperature. The second area is more blue. There is almost not increase of temperature. And the third one, we see many red. So there is an increase of temperature at that given time of about 2 degrees. So we can see that certain urban fabrics, certain building characteristics may be more resilient than others. And by reading this in a much more systematic way, now the study is continuing, and also coupling this with the outdoor, because buildings are today considered as almost as entities that have no connection to the outside, but the first way to achieve resilience clearly come in the coupling with the outside. So where this started? This started at PFL, where I spent 2 or 3 years, where I studied the campus adaptation to climate change. And the first factor for the analysis of resilience was to understand how the different buildings within the campus would behave, what are the loads of exchange, the thermal loads between indoor and outdoor. And material and shape already can be a factor of resilience to changes. We see different colors according to different exchange of temperature with the outside. As well as by measuring temperature on the outside, we can see that each geometrical move, each material, each configuration, by the interplay with the wind, radiation, and other entities gives a given temperature. For instance, we can see that in yellow, this is the old Metabolist PFL campus built on the 60s, is actually the most resilient among the solutions that are here present. But when we look at globally at the campus, there is an interesting fact that what regulation would today suggest is to add isolation of the building in order to prepare for the heating scenario in winter. But with climate change, it's clearly that everything needs to be moved to the summer scenario. We have to almost consider another and a new climatic zone. But today we still design with weather file that are all 10, 15 years. Whereas we need to use from now on only future climatic scenario. As shown today, the climate is quickly changing. But just to show here on the right side, this is the difference in cooling demand if the building would be isolated as recommended by regulation for retrofit, and we would have an average increase of consuming thermal kilowatt hour per square meter, which is differential, but it's quite significant, the impact of adding insulation, the bad impact of adding insulation. Okay, so changing scale and passing to the urban block. Mediterranean cities are quite populated by this construction of the 70s. This is the case of Malaga. And it's important to begin to think some more complex ways to deal with the retrofit of these spaces for climate change. Those spaces have often very much hardscape, compact development car in there, and this compactness, whereas for someone is a benefit. If you look at climate change, I'm not totally sure that compactness is a good value for the city. A dispersed city within certain climate may give better results. But without entering into this perhaps school of thoughts or these approaches, it's perhaps interesting to add to very hard type of approaches, those that look at outdoor comfort or decarbonization or photovoltaic potential, some intra-layer, which is about the quality of the space that you are designing, or the contact with nature, biodiversity, and so on. So we know for sure that spaces are going to warm up into the future. This is air temperature according to projection for instance, this given cohort. And we know that building will consume much more energy in primary energy in 2 summers. But perhaps it's possible, and this is actually this was study was about, how can we introduce a qualitative factor? For instance, what is the contact of people with the nature, linking perhaps to the nature-based solution that we've seen before? And we know also that building have an effect on the soil, on what is happening in the ground, in the biodiversity, both for vegetation and animal. So what does it mean to change the local temperature of 3 degrees in a given point? So I believe that probably as of the built environment, we need to relate much more, perhaps to all the institute of this of the Cyprus Institute, in order to get all the information, sometimes parametric information, on how certain delta of temperature will then lead to different conditions on multiple levels. And we look at the outdoor. Of course, it's not only the thermal, but it's about water. And these are some works we have done in Copenhagen, where there was a big water bomb at some point in 2012 or 2013. And from that, the city decided to implement a full plan on how to adapt to that. So all the hardscape, most of the hardscape was converted into nature-based solution, if we want to use this definition. And the idea is, of course, to collect or to disperse at a lower rate or to accumulate and so on. And this sort of approaches gives also this sort of, let's say, line, this section that changes. But it's very important to understand that we can sort of design how much we can collect, but mainly that this type of feature have several co-benefits in terms of climate change. So having water and evaporative transpiration along with the understanding of the space and the design of it can allow, for instance, to create a zone which is thermal resilient to climate change. And these are some demonstrations I will show later. And also this space, by the discourse of coupling indoor and outdoor, if designed this way, will allow the surrounding building to use much less energy for cooling, because a microclimate it's sort of created. So these are some of the study of how the thermal condition is changing in place given this new condition. And perhaps it's important sometimes to go on site and measure how the climate is changing into the city, combining therefore simulation with some small measurements, also as an educational tool to understand the climate of the city. And decompose perhaps all the variables that contribute to climate in order to understand what is the variable that would change into the future. And by collecting this on-site data, what we can have is an understanding of how, for instance, urban form is giving a certain behavior when we think about climatic changes. Now, the point is, we have a changing climate. Do we only want to protect from it, or we can play with it? So this is a work for the city of Famagosta in Chile, in the Atacama Desert. And the concept is this: to embrace diversity in terms of temperature, map the different temperature into the city, track what is happening inside the building and outside the building in terms of thermal loads, unfold all the different activities and try to understand that certain activities is okay, but they happen in a very warm climate, and certain others needs a much lower temperature. And then perhaps is about insert a creation into the planning. Oops, I skipped some image, I think. So interplay with this new adapt to the changes rather than only separate from that. And a little bit perhaps in honor of Salvatore that spent a lot of time into the Nordic, just a small example of how can we cope with climate change. We have a very interesting tradition of Scandinavian houses by famous architects like Alvar Aalto, Cosmo, Jacobsen, Erskine, of houses that interplay with the outer climate. Whereas today we build shapes that are separated from the environment, there is no dialogue. And how we build today is to have isolated boxes where there is separation from indoor and outdoor. Houses are built in summer like fridge, and they're built in winter like basically oven. And here probably there is not legacy between the human body and the site. There is little understanding and maneuverability of surface. Probably there is a thermostat that where you can control the temperature, and one radiant ceiling to achieve cold or warm, with a certain expense of energy. But if you look at older cases, there is a way. Now I can do 5 hours lecture about this, but I will not, for your respect. But it's possible to just use architecture, orientation, and so on as a way to have houses that are able to interplay with climate with almost no energy or no energy. I'll show later the consumption of these two rows. And also for the outside, all these houses are separated, whereas it's possible to have consider the outside as a thermal zone, which is filtered by different type of panels. And also we are living in a house today where we want one temperature for all, whereas our body to be in health need to be stimulated and perhaps a bit the effort of thermoregulation is something that gives us health. Living in an environment of the same temperature, and this is a research with the Technical University of Eindhoven, is leading to diseases, major diseases, including diabetes. If we see at the tradition of, and this again in honor of Salvatore is in Norway, but what we have is that the body, when you're sitting, is exposed to two different temperatures. There is even a small step, and so that you have connection to the fire. And then, as you can see, this sofa has no back, so you are exposed to all the cold coming from the snow that you can see from. So this concept, in a way, is stimulating the body to have a double exposure to two different temperatures, and in a way. Also, if you look at Alvar Aalto house, this room has 68 possible configurations that are just intuitive. The user is able to understand and do it with no manual. You don't have. And what surprise of this, and is an approach that can be applied in Mediterranean countries, is that if you look at the consumption of the 4 buildings that were built 100 years ago, and the consumption of the building built in the latest 10 years with the most recent technology, and these are the blue charts. The four cases are the older cases, and the latest 4 are the newer one. Consumption for heating, cooling, and lighting are comparable. If we, when we look then at the material use and the embodied energy, it's clear that the older house has impact much more. But this is a big parenthesis, I will not open it. Just a few cases of building design for climate change. This is a consultancy I gave for Bjarke and Ingels in the Faroe Island. So the idea is to create a building which is giving climate to the site. And now with climate change, the stream are changing direction. And it's not anymore just sea to land and land to sea exchange of wind, but wind comes from several directions. So this building is creating several micro areas on the outside that are protected by this extension. So there is always one zone that is in comfort. Also, the shape of the building comes from an analysis on how species adapt to climatic changes, and the final shape has some rule of compactness and shape that is related to that. So when it comes to adaptation to the outside, this is a work done with Skidmore and Merrill in San Francisco, where it's a church, and the idea is not to create a barrier from indoor and outdoor, but again to embrace the climate and to have a system that magnifies certain conditions that you have on the outside rather than blocking them. And yes, there are some thoughts about light, ventilation, but this is just modulated, it's not avoid. And this concept is of course then checked according to thermal patterns, but the main idea is to offer diversity rather than same concept here for the Lavazza coffee company in Torino, where there are several let's say reasoning on how to offer biodiversity and change and mitigate climate into the city. But perhaps I'll just link to the concept said before of offering different thermal stimulation. So in this case, the facade has some double facade, some single facade, spandrel of different color, glass of different colors, in order that the wall on the inner side has different temperature and the body is exposed to different temperature, a little bit like we saw before. This, of course, comes from several studies, including those done with the University of Cyprus, where I've been collaborating. What we find out with them is that, for instance, I don't want to launch too many topics, but by playing with the facade of building, we can create a climate also for the outdoor, not only for the indoor. And in given climate, for instance, even Abu Dhabi, we can change summer temperature up to 7 to 4 degrees. We can cool down the outdoor by a certain design of the facade. And these are all studies that were started here at University of Cyprus, where we saw also that geometry has a big impact in creating an outdoor climate. So for instance, and this is Nicosia climate, we can see that by even including some geometry into the facade, in the optic of 2080, we can cool down the street. So this is, there is no use of energy in a way, but I guess time is finished, right? 1 minute, okay, yeah. Okay, I'll skip some part, but just to mention that then even at the personal level, we can create our own microclimate. And we have this master in Copenhagen of architecture and extreme environment, where we try to understand solution for climate change and how this delta T, this resiliency, can be used for instance, stimulating indoor system based on that are able to store CO2, and I will not show the video, but basically we have in different locations of the world several prototypes for climate change. You can just go, if you have time, in architecture and extreme environments in YouTube, and then there are several solutions that are across this, perhaps some of the several topics discussed today in this very nice session. So I will not show the videos, but perhaps some reference can be found in this book, which is free for download in ResearchGate, which is about this topic. So just one final thought. When we talk about this increase of temperature, it's interesting to begin to hyperlocalize it into the city or into a building, into a neighbor, or into a, and try to understand how we can create solution that allows nature and human to adapt as much as possible to this. And I think this adaptation is also the one that can lead to mitigation. Nowadays we talk about mitigation first and then adaptation, but adapting first will probably facilitate the mitigation at lower cost, linking to Fabio's discourse. Okay, I've touched too many topics, so perhaps I close here.
Thank you very much, Emanuele. Very inspiring. I would have a lot of comments, but I think that we will sort out them during a dinner or a coffee break. Just one thing, I really like a couple of points that I hope that will be a source for future discussion. The first one, sometimes the question is questionable. So for example, what is thermal comfort? That was stated some years ago, 40 years ago, that absolutely avoid radiative differences, might be, something that we have defined too strongly. And in some ways in the Mediterranean, we are used to changing environment. Second, does not exist one way, but also within the same environment, within the same technical feature, just using other tools that might not be included in standard building regulations, codes, this might have an impact. And we might know, architects might know these. The interesting thing is that we also have tools that could help us in generating knowledge. The issue will be, and we will discuss possibly also later, how to transfer these to policymakers. How can this become a degree of freedom without giving the possibility just to do whatever developers want, that are not the one that will use the buildings. So thank you very much. Any question? We have time for 3 questions.
Well, better we save time for.
No question from online? Good.
Thank you so much for this very interesting presentation. In my career as a professional expert engineer, I worked a lot on energy and then on water. And the question that I always thought about is how can we cope between thermal resistance and structural resistance. It's really something very important for our zones here because we are in earthquake zones. And when we talk about thermal resistance, we think directly about light structure. And then when we want to really think about structural resistance, we directly think about reinforced concrete or pre-stressed, not that much pre-stressed concrete, steel design or reinforced concrete. So how can we really cope between both of them? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I guess also Salvatore would be able to answer in much in depth. It's true that these are two pullers, the structural and the thermal approach, and they make divergence, they may converge. So it's quite a difficult exercise to make them converge. And I found, especially in Sicily, there was a very interesting seminar or conference on seismic and energy, and I could really see how these were two distinct families, but probably this dialogue needs to be enriched and thought through, especially because climate, the changing of climate is changing also the factor of this dialogue. So yeah, I agree with your point. Yeah.
Just one remark. It's extremely important when we take into account the whole life cycle of building. Since in some schools, you mentioned were schools, so wood is a new material that can provide important structural performance, also very low embodied energy. In other conditions, classical approach with steel, concrete would have completely different order of magnitude, different embodied energy. So this challenge is an open challenge that would require really different communities to really sit together. And in our climates, we cannot just say, let's have timber buildings. We might miss this kind of source. You? Please, from the question, yep, I cannot read it.
I can say it if you prefer.
Please, we
please.
see you, Gonzalo.
No, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, making the link with my work, how far you have been using these methodologies. For instance, these very nice graphics on the climate impact on the neighborhoods. So how far do you have been engaging citizens to develop solutions together, in the sense that it also creates awareness to the way citizens behave and the way citizens can use for instance, the public space. Have you been involved in this kind of research or design?
Okay, thank you for spotting one of the gap of my research. Actually, it's in the Master of Extreme Environment where we do these prototypes. The process is very participatory. From one side, talking to the community. For instance, the master has been in the Gobi Desert in Amazonia, Tanzania, Alaska, and the discussion really comes as well as in your research in the dialogue with try to understand what are the problem, and somehow we almost act as a bridge between scientists and the community. Using architecture as well as in your work as a way to create a glue and find a meaningful solution. So that is almost one of the axes of this work, but in others, let's say there is almost, I wouldn't call it a technocratic architectural approach. But to fill this gap, we have started now a work with the University of Crete, where there is a full team of people used to do tactical urbanism or other form of engagement of the community. And so the project is at the start, and perhaps I will send it to your review and just to have a comment or to begin collaboration. Yeah, thank you. Great point.
Somehow it's a follow-up of the previous question. It's about the way we can make the access to this kind of solution as broader as possible. So this kind of approach is pretty good for, and it's very well applied to high-end buildings. So buildings where you have investments, you have time, you have money,
Yeah.
and at the same time we have a so urgent need of this kind of solution for let's say large cities, and they should be somehow downgraded in terms of cost, accessibility. What can we do, Manuel, for that?
Okay. This is a very
simplify.
It's this is the point. This is a very challenging question, because from one side we have policy that have a very reductionist approach. Even if we talk about adaptation of city to climate change, we talk about perhaps ozone level or number of days of extreme event that we have to adapt to. On the other hand, we have the European Community regulation, which has a very old as an approach that is not pro climate change, because it's investing on preparing the building for winter, whereas the problem is summer. And then we have the community of designer and architects that or engineer to extend, but were not educated to face climate change, and the academic of today are themselves not ready to, most of, well, not people like Salvatore, but in general, they don't have the knowledge to even the practitioner that define themselves sustainable, they look at energy consumption. In best case, they may have one nice feature, like the use of a certain material or the incorporation of a greenscape within the indoors, but it's one feature. And what is totally missing is any knowledge about climate change. There is no education, and even in the scientific community, I see that many talks and news discover of climate change, but they propose what they've been proposing the day before, just calling it for climate change. But there is not even a projection of what is happening in 2050, which is a big agent of change. Here in Cyprus, just to localize the discourse, the sun ray that could have been used in winter at a certain angle to warm up the building in winter, now are already in a middle season where when it's warm. So we need to protect from a higher number of rays of sun. Just to show a small example that changes the picture. So education, to answer to your question, will be the key, and so the work of this institute, for instance.
You know, more panels to insulate instead of shutters to protect. And,
exactly.
There is a culture, a big culture in simple solutions that everybody could use. You should create a momentum, and I think this is the real need.
Sure. Just a small example. In Italy now there is this strong incentive to retrofit building. It's money that is directly given. You can retrofit your building for free with no cost, and is only about the winter scenario. There is nothing for summer, which is actually what will be harsh.
Since my father applied, I realized something very interesting is winter scenario plus electromobility.
Plus electromobility.
Yes, you are obliged to have also the charging station. No cars, no plants, but this, so it's preparing the field. Thank you, Emanuele. One final question.
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, thanks, Manuel. This was a very inspiring talk. I'm coming from a completely different field, and this is the field of atmospheric sciences and air quality. Now, I understand that in the energy sector, and specifically on what you have described, there's a lot of work in let's say the thermal comfort adaptation out of climate change. I'm wondering if a similar amount of activity is currently focusing on looking into the indirect quality, because if you see the big picture, I mean, climate change is mainly happening because of the gaseous pollutants that we have. And the question now is, whether we have the right strategies to design buildings that can, at the same time, not only give us, thermal comfort, but also a good quality in the breath that we breathe. Because at the end of the day, the question is, what's more dangerous? Is it the air that we breathe in the buildings, or is it temperatures in the buildings that's affecting our, health, mortality, and so on and so forth?
Sure. Well, you have in the institute one of the European experts, Salvatore, about the air indoor quality, but to my understanding, well, of course, there is an emphasis of reducing the pollution within the building, which is still a sustainable concept and not a regenerative concept, because we are still trying to limit the damage that the building will do to people, whereas we should think of building that create health for people. Of course, materials are changing, and I would say that today it's possible to create building by proper choice that do not create a problem for people that live in it, if material are chosen in a certain way. The problem is that the pollution comes from the outside, as you probably study, and in this case, adding to climate change, which needs that all the, I guess, the chemical reaction is changing due to the new climatic. So when it comes to air quality, I would say that most of the problems are on the outside, and this is where atmospheric science and architecture or urbanism should meet. I just did a seminar in Milan about that with the meteorologist and air quality expert and architects. And so nowadays, what are the ways to reduce pollution at ground level? It's certain surface that absorb it. It's reduction of emission, localize. It's to create corridor for cars and have distancing. So this is a topic that will need to enter very strongly into the planning of cities, because nowadays is treated very superficially. So solution has yet to be found, and we are just at the beginning of this type of integrated approaches. Thank you.
Manuel.
So the next speaker is Matthias Fillon from Anima. And Matthias, he will talk about the Next Society, which is one of the most important initiatives in triggering entrepreneurship in the Mediterranean area, and with a strong specific impact in this region. And we asked Matthias to talk about the Next Society and introducing the perspective of impact of entrepreneurship in the sustainability of the area.
Yeah, hello everyone. Could you see my screen? I think I just share it.
We see it.
Okay, that's great. Okay, excuse me. Now it should be better. So hello everyone, and thank you very much for this invitation. My name is Matthias Fillon from Anima Investment Network, which is a platform for economic cooperation between Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We are leading a project since 2017 to support innovation capacities in the region, in the Mediterranean, with the ambition to contribute to facing the challenges, some of the challenges of this region at least, like mitigate climate change, fight against social and territorial imbalances, support the rise of technology, create the job of the future. So that's why the name of this project is deliberately modest, and we choose to call it the Next Society.
Sorry, Dr. Filon, we see your presentation in presenter mode.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. Maybe I'm gonna try to move it in a normal mode. Is it better now?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, so that's perfect. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I lose my notes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, doesn't matter.
We see the cover page. And
yeah,
now
excuse me.
We see now objectives and long-term vision of TNS.
Yes,
Slide
absolutely. So that's good. The project started in 2017 and is funded by the European Commission through the DG NEAR for a contribution of around 7 million euros. And the long-term vision or the general objective is precisely to strengthen innovation ecosystems in the neighborhood South region, in particular in 7 specific countries, which are Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan. So we are on. We implement this project in these 7 countries. Thanks to, I would say, a wide range action plan targeting in particular startups, business clusters, technology transfer offices, and also the policymakers in charge of innovation in these countries. So we have a lot of activities and services in order to address the needs of these populations or these beneficiaries, let's say. And the 3 main action lines thanks to which we implement this project are the following. First, feed and grow this community of innovation or of innovation stakeholders from Europe and South Mediterranean countries. And most important, provide this community with networking, matchmaking, and funding opportunities. So this is really the first ambition of the project, to feed this community. Second, we also intend to mobilize national ecosystems at national level to cooperate, to streamline their action, and to improve national frameworks related to innovation in order to support the strategies coming from public authorities. And finally, we also intend to provide a regional space for dialogue and to allow innovation stakeholders to showcase, to benchmark good practices or national good experiences, and bring these best practices at regional level. So this is also a space for dialogue. Just an overview of the community we have contributed to create since 2017. Anima is the coordinator of this community, and we initiated it 4 years ago with 25 partners organizations. And the interesting thing is that we have been joined since this date by 25 or 27 other organizations, which we consider as ecosystem partners. So this community really grew during these 4 years, and we rely now on 60 organizations able to contribute to the implementation of this project. Here, just a very quick overview on the direct beneficiaries of the project. We have supported directly more than 400 startups coming from the 7 South Mediterranean countries I mentioned, 95 technology transfer offices. So all these organizations playing that role of interface between academia and the markets, 50 business clusters, among which 25 have been really supported. I mean, the same 25 ones during since the beginning of the project. So more or less, they are the beneficiaries of the project, and we can add to them all the policymakers in the ministries, in the national agencies of these countries, with who we have worked in order to prepare national roadmaps for innovation, depending on the needs of each ecosystem. I'm gonna talk a little bit about some results and impact of this project, since we already have 4 years 4 years feedback. One first interesting thing is regarding what we have created as a knowledge tool and resources in order to monitor the evolution of innovation in the region. And that's why we have created a tool which is called the Mediterranean specific scoreboard for innovation and competitiveness. Why Mediterranean specific? Because, as you probably know, usually the scoreboards or the rankings we use to measure innovation are the tools coming from OECD or from the World Bank, and the indicators chosen to measure the innovation are not always very relevant, depending of the regional area where we are. And precisely for the Mediterranean region, these indicators chosen by the World Bank or OECD were not relevant. That's why we created this new scoreboard, which has not the ambition to replace the tools coming from the World Bank or OECD, but we have selected 78 indicators which are absolutely relevant for the situation of the region. And we have translated this tool into an online page where you can go on the Next Society website, which is quite interesting because it's interactive. So that means you can select a country or several countries, depending of your interest, and select a family of indicators in order to visualize on a graph the performance of the country or of the countries or related to this indicator. So that's quite interesting, and for the first time it allows to have a common basis in order to talk about innovation in these 7 South Mediterranean countries. So I really encourage you to have a look on it on the Next Society website. I continue to present some of the main results and impact of the project regarding startups. So basically what we are doing within this project for startups, we provide them different services related to mentoring, capacity building, different opportunities also to connect them depending on their needs on the foreign markets. And one of the most significant impact we can present today is that several of them raised more than 2 million euros in order to develop a product to internationalize a solution, which is quite interesting. We can also say that at least half of these 400 startups have created nearly 200 jobs, which is also very interesting. I continue with clusters. What we provide to business clusters is mainly three things. First, capacity buildings, essentially related to cluster management in the Mediterranean countries. Also, matchmaking opportunities, essentially with European clusters, in order to include their members, which are basically SMEs, into European and Mediterranean value chains. By the way, we are organizing an event called Tech Days tomorrow and Wednesday, where around 100 clusters already registered in order to work on their portfolio of companies and forcing business deals for their members. And from these matchmaking events, already have been signed 45 MOU or partnerships. So this is for clusters, and we also have a specific program for research-based entrepreneurs, where we also can report very encouraging collaboration, either with industrialists or with investors. So we have this dedicated program to accelerate the entrepreneurs coming from an academic background. I continue with the work plan. We basically the essential of what we are providing is really to animate this community through matchmaking and funding opportunities, and this is illustrating through different programs like the Ask an Angel programs, where we form binomes between the business angels and the Mediterranean startups in order to work on internationalization. The same with the cluster mentoring program, also where the idea is also to work with peers of clusters coming from EU and another from the South Mediterranean region, in order not only to transfer knowledge and good practices, but also to open new channels related to internationalization or expansion. So you can see the other acceleration programs. I will not mention all of them. One other quite interesting dimension is what we are doing with the policy labs webinars. So basically, they are regional policymaking webinars related to innovation policies or innovation instruments implemented in these 7 countries. Where we present them in a more regional space in order to discuss these instruments or policies considered as best practice, and also to try to inspire possible other countries. So this is really important, this regional dimension for us, not only to run a work plan at national level, country by country, but also to try to leverage at regional level by highlighting these best practices. Of course, what we also do is to work at national level, as I previously mentioned, in order to streamline each national innovation system. Essentially, government academia and private sector. So the thing we are doing since almost 5 years is to organize what we call the advocacy panels in order to put around the table the main representatives of each national innovation system and to make them establish priorities to answer the needs of each ecosystem. And then we provide technical assistance in order to try to implement what correspond to these first priorities decided by the ecosystem itself. So this is really a bottom-up approach decided by the innovators or by the representatives of the ecosystems. And here I put on this slide some example of technical assistance missions which have been conducted in Eastern Mediterranean countries. So you can see that the thematics are quite diversified, but what we can say is that each time the common thing is that they really intend to streamline the ecosystem, to streamline the effort put by the three parts: governments, private sector, and academia, in order to better make them work together on a sole direction and integrating the best strengths of each part of this ecosystem. So that's always the most difficult thing to do, especially when you are an external actor. But we really want to support these dynamics in order to streamline the innovation ecosystems. Regarding green innovation, which is a part or a sector represented in the beneficiaries supported by the project, we can see that around half of our beneficiaries develop solutions in the SDGs of the UN. So this is what we call the tech for good. There are around 200 startups in developing solutions that can contribute directly to this SDGs. We can also say that actually this is not a correct figure. This is not 30%, but probably more like 40% of entrepreneurs we support are women. And all of them raised more than 2 million euros. I already mentioned that. Okay, so I continue to the next slide. Yes, here I put 3 examples of green startups supported by the project. So I also really encourage you to look at the small capsule, video capsules we put on our website or on our YouTube channels. For example, Sea Green in Lebanon transforms sludge into local organic fertilizer. So this is really interesting, and they, by the way, just won an interesting grant from UK Embassy, I guess, in order to support their internationalizations and also development in Lebanon. In Jordan, we also support Akia Sanitation through different acceleration programs, by the way, because they develop innovative sanitation solutions for the very base of the pyramid population, especially in the refugee camps, and they provide very innovative solutions. So they really deserve to be known and supported. And finally, Cloudfreight in Morocco, also very interesting startups who connect shippers to carriers across Europe and Africa. And the added value is that they optimize truck empty returns and they reduce carbon footprint of the trucks consequently. So they are just examples. We have plenty of other startups supported within the programs, but just to give you an overview. Some lesson learned and possible recommendation based on I would say our observations and also based on the feedback from our beneficiaries. We can say that first the most effective support strategies and activities towards these populations or these startups include always international acceleration programs like mentoring, very important, but also international soft landing missions. So basically, the soft landing missions we implement in different of our acceleration programs consist in bringing an entrepreneurs coming from the south for a short period of immersion in Europe or in the market target in order to test a market, to have different meetings with potential customers or partners, and definitely these activities looks like the most effective. Also, technology transfer, I did not mention it, but we really have a dedicated program of acceleration dedicated to support technology transfer. So basically to help technology transfer offices in the South Mediterranean countries to better market their portfolio of innovation and really to help them bring their solutions outside laboratories and very closer to the markets, either in their countries or in Europe. In order to promote and valorize the innovation coming from Mediterranean labs. And of course, access to finance, which is absolutely crucial, whatever the sector target. So when we look at what could be the different possible roles for public agency or public authorities in these countries, we can mention, of course, a more integrated value chain of innovation financing products, which is not the case most of time, and help reinforce financial capacities and collaboration channels within each innovation ecosystems. Again, this issue of working as an ecosystem, which is probably one of the most barrier for innovation in the region. Finally, and I will stop. Yeah.
1 minute. Thank you.
Yes, that's absolutely perfect, and this will be my last slide. What we can say in order to push or to help businesses of the region greening their production modes is to encourage these diversified financing instruments. We can be dedicated to green investment, promote green procurement policies. Also, that's quite simple and easily that can be easily implemented in national agencies, and deliver direct support to companies investing in greener production modes. This is a case of the green value chain, which is an investment credit line for green investment in Morocco, supported by, I think, the EBRD. And probably that can be presented as a good practice in order to inspire other Mediterranean countries. It's not huge, it's only 90 million euros, but still this can be considered as a good practice and encouraged by also the actors of economic cooperation like we are, to be replicated in other contexts or other more Eastern Mediterranean countries. So I will not continue more, but I encourage you to go on the website of the project, the Next Society, if you want to have more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Since we are gonna ending soon the open session, then I would ask for questions after the next intervention.
I don't know if, as I know, Matthias is leaving because of an internal meeting in minutes. So I don't know, Matthias, are you staying with us or are you leaving?
I can stay for a couple of minutes.
So probably if we want to make one question, let's make this now, because I knew that Matthias was.
Yeah, absolutely. I have another meeting, but if it's like in 10 minutes, I can stay.
I think that we can, because if we move to the next presentation.
Okay. So I will be happy to answer to a question if someone want to ask.
Just a short question from my side, Matthias. If we would embed this process in cities, so you mentioned that the case of Morocco, which is quite interesting because they are addressing a chain, so an industrial chain. Let's revert this to problems we can see in a city. So how we could try to dynamize entrepreneurship in a city in order to face not a chain of an industrial chain, but let's say a chain of problems in a city. Do you think that we should tackle this approach from another perspective, which is more, let's say, related to people, to more traditional businesses? So how would you take it in terms of innovation in a city?
I don't know, but you know, for me, the thing is that that become relevant when innovators work on developing solutions that can directly answer their own needs, and that's why I think supporting innovators and the youth in the Mediterranean when they develop solutions that can directly bring something to solve the big challenges of their region, that's relevant because more or less in the region you can find a kind of unity in the main challenges to solve, like water scarcity, like climate change, like food dependency, or the very high rate of unemployment. I'm not specialist at all, but probably cities of the region also meet the same difficulties, and maybe that could be an entry also to together entrepreneurs working on the cities' main issues to work together within a regional common program or something like that. Because I have to say that within the Next Society, and I probably did not mention it, all the acceleration programs we are delivering include beneficiaries of the 7 Mediterranean countries I mentioned at the same time. Also to generate, a kind of emulation among them, and from these emulations and best practices exchange among them, some good common project or good exchange also emerged.
So this is the Mediterranean way we've been talking about, which is transforming the people with challenges into solvers of their problems. That's a possible way. Thanks so much, Matthias, for staying with us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
So we are at the last intervention. So basically, we start with a couple of examples, live, urban proof, and Urbinat, that shows us that this is possible to have good examples, inspiring example. Then with USOL, we got also some methodology opening up towards a new way of thinking, new solution, new methodology. Then we discovered that we have a very effective policy framework, at least in the EU, that can enable this. We have also seen now that we have a system to activate investments that is very effective. So the last point, and we have the science, so we have the knowledge that also Manuel has shown. Now the problem is, and the question that typically we hear is, who's gonna pay for it? And speaking with the next speaker, that is Luca Bertalot from European Mortgage Federation, European Covered Bond Council, I discovered that maybe this is the wrong question. And I hope that Luca will show us a new way of thinking and new opportunities that are raising up, just switching our mind. Please, Luca, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Salvatore, and good afternoon to all of you from Brussels. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Yes, I mean, in theory, I think I'm the one paying the bill. I mean, that's what Salvatore was hinting to, but I mean, no, I mean, we are trying to mobilize 2,000 banks in Europe to try to support the renovation wave. We really believe that banks can play an important role in helping citizens in making huge investment in their houses, but also we can help in designing a new ecosystem which can really help the European authorities to manage the unprecedented challenges that we have in front of us. After COVID experience, we all feel—
Sorry, Luca.
Yeah.
Sorry, are you sharing your screen?
No, I mean, I have not prepared a slide, so I was thinking to, so I mean, if it's fine with you, I mean, I was thinking to capture the attention with my face, if you don't mind. What we are trying to build in Europe is a new infrastructure, financial infrastructure that can support a renovation wave, as I said. And we would like to develop local and European and global infrastructure that can help citizens in renovating their houses. We know that the average expenses for a family in Europe to make an energy renovation is around 25–30,000. And we know also that the numbers of houses that have to be renovated in Europe, only residential houses, is more than 200 million of units. So the challenge that we have in front of us is not only an industrial challenge, is not only a knowledge challenge, but is also a financial challenge. And we all know that if we want to secure a level playing field among countries, we have to give the same opportunity to an Italian citizen, a Greek citizen to a Danish one, or a Swedish citizen. So we know that banks have an important role to give this opportunity to citizens and to try to fight against climate changes all together in the same way. So it's a question of method. It's a question of method on how banks will actually approach this issue, address this challenge, and trying to produce solutions. What we are doing is that we are analyzing the value chain on how mortgages are actually provided into the market and how banks can build a win-win process which will secure a successful, I would say, renovation of the house, which will improve the quality of life of the citizens, but also improve the quality of the asset in the balance sheet of the banks and reducing financial stability risk. Because at the end of the day, climate change is mainly a financial stability risk, which will impact negatively the balance sheet of banks, but also the life of every European citizens. So we decided to start it from the citizens and trying to see how energy efficiency can actually improve the life of citizens. Well, energy efficiency has a huge impact on the disposable income of all of us. I mean, especially now that the energy prices are increasing, and probably we have been working from home, and we all discovered that our energy bill has increased of at least 1/3 of what was before. So keeping the energy bill under control is a strategic issue for all of us, for every single family, but is also a very important social element that can prevent our society to push the fragile part of our economy to the limits. So what we can do? Well, quite a lot. I mean, we discovered that if you make energy renovation in the proper way in the house, so it means that you make a jump of 2 energy efficiency category, you can save up to 70% of your energy bill, which is extremely important if you consider that the housing expenses in all the European families are the most important expenses of the families. In some cases, I'm thinking to the fragile part of our Greek communities, I mean, can reach even 70% of the expenses of a family. So if we compress the energy cost, we can really give space to families to grow their kids, to have a better life. And so it's not only an economical story, it's a socio-economic story. That is the way how Europe is trying to invest in the next generation. Because if we improve the quality of our citizens, if we allow them to give more education to their kids, we can really have an investment in the next generation. So the banking sector has a very strategic role in this, and we all feel the responsibility of being a driver for a new ecosystem. Banks cannot live alone. I mean, banks, they need energy efficiency experts. We need valuers. We need small and medium enterprises. We need architects. We need the university to build the knowledge around the banks to move forward. So we love to say that this is our Bauhaus, is the opportunity to build better and to build as soon as possible and to convince every single family to renovate their house. Now, when you have to make a renovation, is a very difficult microeconomic decisions. It should be very clear to every single family the convenience. That is the deal that they have to do, and we all know how difficult it is. Material costs are going up, and we know that, I mean, we have to make clear to families what is the opportunity cost of not investing in their house. Banks, we think that if we can build a European strategy on this, we can provide energy efficiency mortgages that will help families in reducing 30% of their energy cost. That's our target at the European level. We are convincing all the banks in Europe to prepare energy efficiency mortgages. We are convincing the European authorities that this is an integral part of our strategy. And today, we are really negotiating with the European Commission to give a special regulatory treatment to the banks that will be able to support the renovation wave and taxonomy. Taxonomy will change the mentality of the consumers, and banks have to be ready to produce taxonomy compliant instrument into the market. That's very important because we need to convince consumer to renovate their house. Then we have to build a new asset, which are called green bonds. And then we have to sell these green bonds to new investors, green investors, probably institutional investors coming from central banks and in other countries. The challenge that we have in front of us is huge, because we are speaking about legal challenges. Banks have to disclose data about their portfolio, and they have to contribute to the recovery after COVID. What is the potential of the energy efficiency mortgage structure? I think it's huge. We have to consider that in Europe, mortgages, they count for almost 50% of the European GDP. So if we can increase the capacity of the mortgage industry to invest in green, we can really move the entire housing sector to a new dimension. What is the contribution that can be done by us? Well, the housing sector in Europe contributes for 40% to the pollution of the European Union. So we believe that our contribution is a systemic and structural to the modification of the European landscape. We are also working together with our global friends. We are working together with the Canadians. We are working with the World Bank in several emerging countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Morocco, and trying to see how we can export our ideas of green mortgages in also those markets. It's a challenge that is really changing the best practices of the market. Most of the banks are trying to fine-tuning their mortgage lines to support this effort. What we discover, very interesting, is that banks are not changing only the mortgage product, but they are also changing the consumer loans strategies. because banks can really help not only with mortgages, but also by providing very tailor-made loans for renovation to their clients. We see this contribution as a top-up for European citizens. So the idea is that we have to leverage on the already existing public subsidies available in every single country. I think that in 2 presentations ago, you were mentioning about the Italian super bonus, and Salvatore, you were telling about your father doing the renovation for the super bonus. The idea is that banks will come after the super bonus and will give an extra layer of investment to families to make the investment not covered by public subsidies. This is very important because not every single country is having the same level of capacity of investing on public subsidies. So we hope that this will create a better level playing field in the European Union to allow every single citizens to step in. So not only we try to convince citizens that they could have a cheaper energy bill, but we are trying them to convince that they can get a cheaper mortgages if they improve the quality of their house. And on top of this, their energy value of their house will change. We are discovering that there is an important uplift of the energy property with an energy efficiency renovation. In average in Europe, if you move out from G, you have a jump in the value of the property between 8–10%. And if you reach A, which is the best in class, you can arrive to the same level of uplift of 8–10%. This is a massive improvement of the quality of the asset. That's why banks are, of course, very interested in making this kind of, I would say, cultural change. We also believe that marketing department of banks can help in changing the consumer mentality. So if you change the housing sector, you can have a spillover effect, a positive spillover effect also on other financial sectors. You have to consider that, I mean, 1/3 of the balance sheet of the banks is done by mortgages. So probably if a bank will change their best practices for the mortgage sector, they will also change their best practices for the other investment categories and for the other sectors. Together with the University of Venice and Frankfurt, we are working on a small and medium enterprise loan system. So the idea is to develop a new rating approach, which will select small and medium enterprise with ESG parameters. So as I said at the beginning, we are building this ecosystem by plugging in the system new sectors every single time that the situation will become more complicated. Yes, I'm a firm believer that banks can make the difference, exactly like it happened in the Renaissance. We are probably in a similar cultural period where a strong pandemic event has shocked completely the world of that time, and also our world has been completely shocked. Asia, South America, North America, Europe. I mean, it's the first time in the history of the human being that we have an economic shock on both supply and demand side with a huge pandemic effect. So it's the first time that we have seen something like this. And I think the way out is to invest in human resources. The labor market is changing. Smart work is changing our labor market. And I think that we need to invest in the future. And for making the right investment, the banking sector can actually make a difference. How we can imagine the Renaissance without the Famiglia Medici, who were bankers, and they have invested massively in the Renaissance. I mean, all the banks were active players in the Renaissance, and I think that we have to play the same role nowadays, believing in the infrastructure of the European Union, following the new regulatory framework, taxonomy, the banking union, the capital markets union, are setting the scene for a common landscape in the financial world. And in this landscape, there is a place for new investment and green investment. I think that we can really make the difference in the Green Deal. And we are here to work together with you because we need your ideas. we need your help to guide 2,000 banks in the right direction and make the right investment and the right decision. So Salvatore, I would like just maybe, since it was a long afternoon for all of you, open the floor and take a discussion on how we can build together an ecosystem. I would like to, we have several national hubs, as I said, in Italy, in Spain, in Portugal, in the Netherlands, in the Nordics, that are working together with universities to trying to find the technical solutions that can help families in improving their house. We are investing in changing life. And we need your support, because bankers, they do a very boring business, which is lend money. But I mean, we need the technical know-how, and only with the Bauhaus system, we can build this new ecosystem. And I stop here. And Salvatore, thank you very much again for your kind invitation to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Luca, for your intervention. Again, we were mentioning that there are very aligned also cultural references. And with this, I would like to give the floor to anybody who would like to start. Nicolas, please.
Yes, yes. This is Matthias. Thank you. This is exactly what I needed to kind of raise my head and coming from the other side of the Renaissance. And you did correctly mention the importance of banks and the family of Medici. And other examples that really resonate and at least are inspiring examples of from the past. I just wanted to have your response, and then I wanted to also kind of comment further. So how do you think are we doing in relation to the other aspect of the world of Renaissance that you described? And what I mean, I don't mean the financial world, the world of banks and investment and bankers, but the world of culture and cultural heritage, the world of essentially the cultural heritage that provided the tissue for those societies to sustain and essentially to sustain and help those banks to grow. I'm worried that we are weak in that other aspect. And actually, in the aftermath of this whole workshop, I'm more and more convinced of the necessity. I'm very happy that we have identified this task force on cultural heritage, because this is a very important aspect with enormous societal responsibility, but also potential.
Thank you very much for your question, and I fully agree with you. We should start from the heritage buildings. Just to give you an example of one market, I mean, in Italy we have only less than 3% of the public buildings, which probably are part of the heritage that you are mentioning, with an energy performance certification. Without a clear system where it will be clear the advantages of making energy retrofitting for building historical buildings, banks will have the hands tied to make intervention. For example, with Salvatore, we have discussed about how to apply BIM technological aspect to the consideration of important economical parameters. We need your scientific approach to let banks understand that investing in an old monastery or in an old building in Europe is a question of economical and financial perspective. Unfortunately, when you make an investment, you have to consider a return on investment, and we need a scientific approach to make this investment and this return on investment clear and visible. For me, we have to consider also the opportunity cost of not taking action. I mean, but I mean, we are discussing with the European Commission, for example, we are asking the European Commission to make mandatory for every single building in Europe when they do a renovation to have an energy performance certification. Because this is the starting point for banks to enter and comparing the performance at the beginning and at the end of the investment. So we need these basics. We need to alphabetize the market. And I think that also there is also another fantastic opportunity, allow me to say, is that we see that young people now are going back to, I don't want to say small villages, but they are going back. They are not to have a good job. They don't have to work in Frankfurt, in Paris, in Amsterdam, but they can work in a different place. So this is a fantastic, smart working is a fantastic opportunity to re-evaluate and reassess the balance of our housing market. And we should rethink together urbanism and how to design the city of the future. What does it mean beautiful? What does it mean beauty for our city? And how we can bring young people back in places that have been suffering of social desertification. This is a fantastic opportunity, and we feel that we can pay it. We can move the cash flow that can actually make this happen. We need your support. Help us to understand how much I can save by making energy efficiency renovation in an old church, in an old building, in an old barracks, because this will help us in making the financial system more efficient. Because I have to explain this to investors. Because the banks, we should never forget that the banks is in between consumer and investors. So we have to apply transparency in this process. I hope that I answered to your question. Sorry for taking a bit longer than usual.
Thank you. Is there any other question? I mean, I have a follow-up. We could be talking for the next 4 hours about this.
I would now give the floor to George Artopoulos, which is a sort of bridge between culture, technical aspect, architecture, participatory approaches. So that let's try to put on the same level these and try to come up with a sort of synthesis.
Thank you, Salvatore. Hi, Luca. Nice to see you again. Thanks for joining us today. I would like, also as the liaison coordinator of the Task Force on the Built Environment, I would like to thank all the contributors today, all the participants and the presenters for their amazing presentations. I have several comments. Yes, I could also talk for half an hour, but I just want to underline, highlight, mention a few points that I thought that listening to the presentations could stitch everything together or are relevant for us to take when we leave this room. First is regards the an insight discussion in the task force, and it's very technical. It's about the green building regulations, and I just wanted, for the sake of the overall broader context of this workshop, which is the CCI initiative, to say that we see today that there are, and this was part of the results of the research that we did in the task force, we see that there are several green building regulations that are applied and forced in various countries in the EMME region, to name but a few: Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Qatar, Lebanon, and Israel. And I think this is also an opportunity for this initiative to try and facilitate interactions between all the countries and between all the policymakers, at least in that very simple in terms of operation and applicability level, because it's very technical. So you can actually take the opportunity of using this channel of communication that we are establishing through this initiative to exchange good practices and ideas, and see also how, as Professor Papanikolas mentioned this morning, in other continents they are applying these and they are responding to this, say Australia, California, etc., where they are facing similar challenges. The second point is something that is relevant to the last presentation, Luca's presentation, and it's about, again, learning from the results of our task force. There are initiatives in the region attached to or related to smart cities like Mazda, of establishing green real estate trusts for development, but of new buildings, but they are focusing on financing new buildings. And so we should consider and reflect on how we can actually facilitate or start to trigger a discussion in the region along the lines of what Luca was presenting, that is happening in Europe. We know, at least for Cyprus, how behind we lie in terms of ESCOs and the involvement of banks in retrofit. And this is highly important to bridge to what Nicolas mentioned, to consider also the value and the importance of buildings of the recent past and of looking at our built environment in its totality, all the existing building stock, and not only the high value, extremely important monuments, but also the rest of the building stock, which may or may not carry cultural values because of their users, which might be even second generation users of the buildings, but for whom this building stock is an important part of their everyday lives. And I think in this regard, it is extremely important to treat this in a sense as a culturally valuable asset for the future, for the resilience of our cities. And the other point that I wanted to mention, which I'm sure those of you who know me, you were expecting to hear that from me, is about, and this links also to this morning's discussion introduction, is about data. Data basically were everywhere in all the presentations and the discussions we had today in the workshop. They were extremely important in terms of designing new structures, in terms of understanding our built environment in the scale of the city, in terms of what Luca was talking about, building renovation and old buildings, and how we can actually understand, study the structure of the buildings and their materiality from all kinds of aspects, morphological, historical, as well as in terms of life cycle assessment. And this can only be done in a fruitful and effective way if we learn or agree how to handle data. And the point that I wanted to highlight in terms of data, which has not been discussed at all, is the aspect of the new technologies that are analyzing data, say artificial intelligence, and the data ethics that this aspect introduces, okay? Because we have to be extremely important, at least in the sense that we are not so well ahead of the curve in this region in terms of data, because we don't have access to the wealth of data that, say, a city like London, Bristol, or Vienna has. So we have this opportunity to make it right this time, okay? So we have to be aware that this data should be open to all societal groups and to everybody, and not only to those who are always being in favor. Yeah, I think I should stop here. I have more things to say, but I should stop here so that Nicolas can also say a few words about cultural heritage.
And I would also invite the other participants here and online to comment on these. Basically, now we have 4 open aspects. Let's see from online if we have a question.
I think it's the previous one. It wasn't deleted.
Sorry, it was I did a question, but it was to the former presenter.
Yeah, it's the previous one. Yeah. Okay, can I do a follow up? I will follow on the main point of the cultural heritage dimension of the cities. I just wanted to say that for me, this was a very important and very useful workshop. So many thanks to all the speakers. I wanted to also have the opportunity to remind everybody and to turn our focus on the region. I mean, the region, a lot of the examples, of course, that we were presented, of course, and the last one that Luca presented, has a lot to do with also the ability of the European Union, the European Commission, and its huge infrastructure to address European member states, right? We are not talking about that here. This is a very different reality with different, with a volatile present political, economic stresses. I don't need to go into these details. Regarding cities, and most of the cities in this region are historic, and from my perspective and from the perspective of our task force, I wanted to say that we see cities beyond their physical structure and remains, even if they are historic. We see them as complex cultural landscapes, which essentially are the together, it's the interaction they comprise, it's the result of the interaction between human actions and the environment. In this case, it's the built environment. So as such, we cannot really see any discussion about societal resilience without addressing heritage, because heritage is the tissue that keeps these communities, these societies together. Without heritage, our cities, our regional cities, don't really exist. I heard with great interest concepts like, you know, the neighborhood idea, spatial concepts, but at the same time, these neighborhoods are kept together again through heritage, through these kind of relations that are layered and they're built through time. So we need to be addressing those. I know that we are. I feel that there is a necessity also from our side to be more effective in integrating our methodologies, our approaches, integrating cultural heritage better in green economy. But I think that it's a very important aspect that it's both a responsibility, but it's also an opportunity, because cultural heritage can drive the way we communicate about the urgency of climate change, can teach practices, can harvest, can cultivate societal cohesion. When we talk about climate change, we usually, even between us, I mean, just before we mentioned Venice sinking. When you looked at images of Alexandria sinking is also something that immediately you can easily communicate. Floods in Petra. So iconic cultural heritage is a common thread, a common cultural thread that can help our region at least communicate the main message and the urgency better, and at least it can be a base for discussion for other, maybe more difficult areas and domains.
Thank you very much.
If I may add just to that, sorry, Fabio, exactly to what Nicolas described. This is exactly the reason why we should not forget our contribution. I mean, these three task forces in the overall initiative, this point of view from the humanities. We are talking in a more technocratic, engineering-driven approach all around the world about, for example, urban transitions, all right, and urban transition methodologies. Let's not forget that maybe it is the right moment now to start talking about a localized urban transition methods that are integrated in a sense that we understand in this initiative, bringing different disciplines together, but that they are also holistic and they try to bring the societal aspects and the society in the discussion, in the dialogue, through our practices, through history, and so on and so forth.
Yes. Just quick comment. These last three interventions, Lucas, yours, and Yorgos, basically show how integrated are, and also Emanuel's one about the technical prescriptive approach. So prescriptive approach might work in some cases, but not with historical buildings. And also Euro standards with an expected life of building of 50 years, extendable to 100, doesn't work in many of Mediterranean cities and countries where the building is not a fabric, but is the history that we bring back. So we have not to put in competition domains that are just too sectorial, but we have to really think and find the right ways to acknowledge for this complexity through an holistic, real holistic approach. That was one reason why I wanted really to put everything together and possibly also find a way to really advance the region that is complex. We have no data and we will not have a lot of data for all the reasons that we all know, but we need to advance. The 2050 target is there and we must work to get to the point, and with knowing all the limitations. And this is a unique opportunity in my perspective to really start from this sectorial work that we have done in this phase one, and then try to create the foundation for having what we call the coordinated climate action plan. That will be a lot of different things. It's not just one document, but if all these things will aim to the same target, maybe we might get closer and closer to the target. If we diverge due to our different starting point, different preconditions, then we will not achieve definitely the outcome. Please, Fabio.
Yeah, just to open another dimension. Can you hear? Yes. Okay. You were mentioning, Nicolas, the iconic cultural heritage. I would drive the attention to talk about the not iconic, so that let's say the deep cultural heritage that in urban environment is, as somebody said, the city itself. That means that the way the city has been built is reflecting the dialogue of the humans with that site, and before having the possibility of doing whatever they could think to do. So the big problem is that we have to find a way to step out from the modern age without losing everything from the modern age. And we have to, in order to do this, we need links with the past, with the pre-modern age, where we had some constraints that in the modern age we have been forgetting. So as Gonzalo has been showing, at a certain point of the story, the shape of the city, the urban fabric was built without taking into consideration any limit of the site, any capacity of the site, any orography of the site. The rivers were just channels where we could throw the sewage. So there was no dialogue at all with the site as it was before the human intervention. So now, and this is for me the most relevant heritage from the past, is to restart thinking in the site as we cannot make whatever we want. So restart a dialogue with the site, with the capacity of the site to support, to sustain the human community. That means rediscovering the rivers and the functions of the rivers in terms of ecological services, but also in terms of systems to reconnect the components of the city which have been built without thinking that there was a river there. So this great idea of the healthy corridors, and I was impressed by the picture in Porto, where that site is starting to become again the connecting tissue. Let's say is the buffer zone of all the parts of the city, which start again a dialogue. This is a cultural revolution, is a renaissance somehow, because we are getting out probably from this very strange modern medieval age. So where we couldn't see exactly where was our place in the world. We thought that the world were, you know, just us, and that's not true. So restart thinking in terms of limits, of boundaries. It's a revolution. And if the cities would start to think in this way, is because they were rejoining their past. So they restarted dialogue with the past, where the sun was a force driving the way the city was built. I mean, I've been in my visit in China, I was impressed that they still have the right orientation of the buildings, but not because it prescripted now, but because it was in the handbook of construction of the 11th century. It was a feng shui approach, and they still, when they make the high buildings, they have the right orientation, and they still have the buffer windows to hit the. It's a prescription of 1,000 years ago.
We had Vitruvius as well, but
yeah.
The Nazis.
Your slide, the beginning where you have the recommendations of policies and measures.
Excuse me?
You have the slide from your presentation where you have a list of recommendations and measures, policies and measures recommended.
We have not here. We have not here.
They're not there.
Okay.
Now,
Let
if
me.
they are here, where is one of your first slides? Go down. Yes.
No, these are adaptation strategies. This is the policy framework for, but just for the built environment, with all the policies. Above.
Mitigation measure. This morning, yes. Like that? Like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this morning, Manfred asked a question that was really a challenge of how we are going to convince people to do what is needed for the climate crisis. And it is indeed difficult. Somehow in my mind is a Faustian problem, because climate crisis is in the future. Even if it is a few years away, it is in the future. And it's difficult to give up something of the present for the future. However, this is an issue. We say we want to refurbish buildings so that they are more energy efficient. This means that I must be convinced as a citizen for my house. And therefore, the bank should be convinced to give me a mortgage, and therefore the government should be convinced to have the regulatory. However, in all these cases, there is some main actor. It could be the citizen, it could be companies, it could be banks. So what I would like to ask you, of course it cannot be answered right now and certainly not at the end, but this is the beginning of the next phase of our work, is to go back to each of your recommendations and pinpoint who is the actor to whom education and outreach should focus. Is this a message for the public? Relinquish your cars? Is it a message for Volkswagen? Change what you do? Is it a message for the regulators that you should change the appraisal of companies, taking into account their green assets and therefore changing the value of their shares? And in this way, we shall be able to focus our outreach and our education to that particular clientele who will be critical in being able to actually do these measures? Because there's always the question, energy conservation measures, of course. So why does it not happen? It's obvious. Everybody agrees. Politicians agree, companies agree, citizens agree. Why does it not happen? Okay.
Switching to this.
If you don't touch all the dimensions together, this will not.
Okay. We cannot touch all the dimensions together for everyone at the same time in the time frame that we have. So can you point in each one to the critical and say, for this one, you have to work with this?
It's very, very challenging comment, but we can take from a previous example that we are trying to analyze. That is, for example, the PV. Why PV penetration suddenly is a must, now is a mainstream. Actually, we are overthinking about the potentialities of PV generation locally. Also putting in this taxonomy, for example, lower cultural heritage. For example, in city center in Italy, you are obliged to install 1 kilowatt hour in all the apartments. Since for some reasons, the easiest answer is, oh, the cost was low, but was not just the cost. Of course, the cost is about market. The industry, okay, was ready. Policy, at a certain point, open up a window of opportunity for that technology to become mainstream. But at the same time, science sorted out all the other issues. Actually, we spoke at that time about zero energy buildings with the yearly coverage, with the yearly balance that was perfect for saying, oh, I generate today, I will use next season, without thinking about all the technicalities of technology, energy balances, and also culture. It was easy. We start watching these fields. We start watching agriculture fields covered. We start thinking, okay, this is something that can be done, without thinking what was happening in Italy 10 years ago when we had these fields, just in the agriculture field, where this energy was really going. Nowhere, since we had no real smart grids. It was just thermal energy. But it helped. Of course, policy created the condition with this kind of exchange. So at beginning, for example, it was a weight 1 to 4. You generate 1, you are paid for 4. Also, Germany had some kind of promoting schemes. So it's not a matter of finding one element. In order to have a transition, to move from niche to go into the mainstream, we really need an alignment. If culture will not work, people will not really consider technology that is feasible, it might not work. So we have in the past some technologies that are technically viable, are reliable, but have not become mainstream. Why? For example, make just a stupid example. We had several devices that were doing a lot of stuff. Palm, do you remember Palm? Was a great, or BlackBerry, was a great devices, was mainstream, but wasn't able to follow competitors. And someone else came at a certain point with an idea that was not really new, but just brought in culture, mass culture, and everyone switched to the iPhone. And then the idea of phone changed completely. Now we use it for a lot of stuff, and some companies didn't manage to really get to the point. Also, Apple had the same device, Newton. That was a sort of device where you could take note of stuff. But the culture in that case was missing. The technology was not appropriate, and therefore the market didn't follow up. So in order to really move from here to there, and in all these transformative processes, we really need to work in all, at least according to this scheme. There are also schemes, Fabio can speak about that are even more complex, agent-based, but let's keep it. Possibly. But at least we need to cover all these dimensions. And what is really important is every time, of course, I can speak about energy balances of buildings, I cannot speak about other elements, but it's important for me to stay close with Nicolas, for example, or with all the other colleagues, and try to exchange and understand why something has not worked in the past, why something is working in Europe and not in the Middle East. How take examples, for example, from Europe that is now sort of leading some movements and try to replicate those if possible, understanding why that aspects cannot be done. I'm speaking, for example, with Luca, this mechanism, where was at the beginning of the ESCO idea. So energy efficiency is something concrete. We can assess it with a sort of uncertainty, but quite a robust prediction. So why cannot we make money with that? And we started 15 years ago with ESCOs, and they didn't work. Since some elements there, the market was not there, the culture was not there, some I would put in technology, for example, financial mechanisms were not ready at that time and didn't work. Now it seems that we are in a new renaissance where we are trying to understand what will be the world in the future, since someone from outside is telling we cannot continue in this way, we must change it. And so let's hope that all these new forces will help us to move forward. So what we are trying to do is identifying those conditions, thinking multilaterally and multi-level, in order to identify spots where also in the region we could provide some ideas. Of course, ideas that have to raise from the region for the region. It's hard to take schemes, models developed in Central Europe and bring here. So the idea is to bring energy here and hope that, for example, with innovation, fill-on intervention. So let's try to enable and activate local energies, since the problem of people living in the area are known by people from the area. It's not just UN can sort out all the issues. So
briefly, just to say a few words. I don't want to expand on this. To link to what Fabio was trying to express and communicate. I will rephrase or paraphrase you. Let's try. Let's make our best to bring a renaissance of the humanities and philosophy rather than a renaissance of engineering. By that, I'm sure Fabio understands what I mean. Okay, let's see how the material systemic philosophy and ontology and understanding of the world will help us communicate and educate everybody, both at the top level, the policymakers and the people at the other end of the spectrum, to think of an ecological, ecosystemic approach rather than a human-centric, God-like approach that we can terraform our built environment, we can terraform our landscapes, we have unlimited resources to ignore rivers, basins and everything, and we can just design whatever we want because we have the means and the powers.
Okay. Yeah.
Not an engineer.
Yorgo, thank you. Yorgo, thank you. Thank you. You mentioned, look, you spoke. Okay, I like the term of the Renaissance very much, but of course it's associated with a specific time in Europe. But the concept is there, especially for cities. And let's not forget that. And I totally agree with you that when the Medici or I'll go back in Athens, Pericles invested all the savings of Athens for the Acropolis, and when the sultans of Istanbul built those great mosques and everything, or in Damascus, the great monuments there, these were not happening just for the sake of culture. It's because they knew that investment, it's investing in the societal tissue, that investment will keep those cities together for the future. Those were the smartest investments possible. So we need to keep that in, I mean, totally, we need to keep that into question. That's the connecting tissue. Let's not lose the connecting tissue in our efforts. Yeah.
We have to find our Brunelleschi dome. We have to decide what is the iconic intervention we have to make. We will. Just to close from my side this round. I will not talk anymore, and I think we are also we are just decoding now the way we built this workshop, and probably we can expand around this idea, because this was the starting point when we started talking about this workshop. We have been trying to cover in the very short time we had to organize, but we tried to cover the niche innovation. So we have been talking about how to generate ideas, so a couple of projects and experiences about the generation of ideas. And we have been talking about the different elements of the frame. So how policy can help. We have been talking about the new European policies, the cultural dimension, how the technologies and the industry are serving, let's say, and are approaching and giving us the possibility to reorganize the way the cities are built. And we have been always popping up the role of users, consumers, people, citizens, and the way they are thinking, and so what they are asking for. Of course, this could be 1 week of discussion, probably bringing all the actors in a structured and generative discussion. But this has been just an attempt to put people together with so different mindset and visions, and share what we are doing. And hopefully this is just an opening for something more complex and structured.
Thank you very much. If I would open up with the last round of comments from our speakers, Luca, Gonzalo, Mujahideen, Ali, if you have any closing remark, then you can move on.
Sorry, let me make I was saying goodbye in the chat because I have a meeting in 3 minutes, but just to leave a message of thanks for the organization and for the possibility of sharing some thoughts. I was just one idea that I was putting in the chat that is related also to the Urbinat approach, that is the need to develop solutions where people feel that they are also part of that solution, and that the solution really goes in line with what they do and they know how to do, and that was why I was putting also the emphasis on the solidarity economy. Also, there was then an intervention related to the bank system. So I think we need to find other solutions to solve the financial problems of some financial issues and some solutions. And there is a lot of things that we can also do without a lot of money, by the idea of sharing, and I think that's one of the main issues of our society, is how we find other economic alternatives to our urban problems and for the urban regeneration, trying to work with solidarity initiatives where people share, of course, share their knowledge, but share their way of doing, share what they have and what they also feel that might be a contribution for a better world, let's say. So sometimes things don't go through the banks, but they go through another ways of doing, and I believe that and there is not only me. there was 1 week ago the OECD forum on solidarity economy, and it's already 20 to 30% of our economy in the cities, so it's growing. So I think we need to develop solutions that will have other ways of financing and other ways of implementing the products that are being co-created together, let's say. So that's a challenge that I leave here for the next, maybe for the next forum, for the next workshop. We can also discuss this kind of approach. Thank you.
Thank you for suggesting. Please, Luca.
Thank you, Salvatore. I would like just to leave this meeting with a message of hope, in the sense that we have to decide if we are in front of a simple evolution or something a bit more stronger, maybe a revolution. I think that we are in front of a revolution. Every single time in history, I think that when you have a new set of values arriving in a society, you have a massive change of business model. I mean, I don't believe that we cannot change business models. Business models are there to change. And in a speech a few days ago, I made the example of the slavery. The slavery disappeared in Brazil or in the US in a question of few years. An entire business model was there since centuries, has been completely abandoned because of was not anymore compliant with the set of values of that societies. I think that our society is changing and we have a revolutionary set of values arriving. And I'm quite confident that we will get the right answers to the new needs of citizens. So we have to work all together. We have to really put together all the possible knowledge to be part of this revolution, which will change the life of our kids, maybe more than our life. The one of our kids is more important. And so I'm quite confident we will succeed in this adventure. And I think that the European framework is the right framework for setting this new revolutionary benchmark at the global level. So let's continue to work together, and I think that the financial sector will do the homeworks like all the others in the same way. That's my message of hope to conclude the afternoon. Thank you all for the kind invitation. Thank you, Salvatore.
Thank you, Luca.
Thank you, George.
Well, thank you all the participants. It has been a pleasure for me, for all the other participants to listen all these inspiring thoughts. So let's move on and let's remain in contact, and yeah, with a promise to organize another appointment to continue this discussion. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tomorrow. Day one check. Day one check. One down for the call. Yes. Right. Oh.